Hey everyone, it's Kayvon with Ascari Art. I'm going to do another painting demo, abstract, but I'm going to change it up a little this time. I'm actually going to use the medium weight YUPO paper. I've cut this down to a 9x6 sheet from an 18x12 sheet. And it's medium weight, so it's going to be a lot lighter than the cover stock that I used last time as I did the landscape. Now, the reason I typically don't use YUPO paper is because plastic poster board is a lot cheaper. The second reason is because when I paint these demos, I am practicing for the big show. When I say big show, I mean the big canvases. And when I'm practicing, I like to lift the ink a lot and move it around. And the plastic poster board doesn't stain like the YUPO paper. The YUPO paper, for some reason, leaves a bit of it looks like a coffee stain. It leaves a somewhat stain. Now, you're able to lift it most of the time, but sometimes it leaves, based on the pigment, leaves a tint, like a small light tint. And for practice purposes, I typically don't use it. But for this case, since a lot of users have asked me to try a demo on YUPO paper because the characteristic is different, I'm going to do this demo for you on YUPO. So let's do it. So the colors that we're going to use today are going to be Boysenberry by Tim Holtz, Pinata Brass, Watermelon by Tim Holtz, and Lettuce by Tim Holtz. We're going to be using this lens cleaner here. It's by Giotto. It's called the Rocket. It'll be in the bottom of my description in an affiliate store. I'm also using 99% isopropyl alcohol. So before we get started, I just want to mention that safety first. We want to always wear our nitrile gloves and a respirator mask because the alcohol fumes will affect your eyes and will affect your lungs. So what we're going to do to start is we're going to start from the bottom left corner and we're going to work our way up. So how we're going to do this is I'm just going to pour a little bit of alcohol in the bottom, put a couple of drops of the Boysenberry from Tim Holtz, and I'm going to start moving it around with a Giotto. So as I'm moving this around, I'm thinking about composition, I'm thinking about where I want this color to be, and I'm leaving it somewhat, letting the alcohol move it as I'm guiding it. So as we're going through this, sometimes leaving it is better than trying to move it around. But in this case, it just depends. It takes practice. So just move it back and forth so you can leave those little fine lines. I did get a little bit of the lettuce seeping in from the board that I'm using, but it's okay. This is just practice. You got to make sure that that practice mindset is there when you're working in alcohol inks, because you're always going to learn something new as you're doing this, and I'm learning something new every day with alcohol ink, and I encourage you to keep that open mind as you work, because it'll keep you vigilant and humble as you're doing alcohol ink art or any art. So here I'm just switching out my blow dryer because I realized that the blow dryer I'm using is too powerful for this small sheet of paper. I'm switching over from a regular one to the Revlon little one. I'll have it in my affiliate store in the link in the description below. But I'm just testing this Revlon one out. The only issue is it's got a high setting and a low setting, and it doesn't really have a medium setting, which is it's common with the travel blow dryers and curlers, but just testing it out to see if it works. And I'm also letting this alcohol kind of sit on the paper so that it leaves a hint of the fine lines on the outside edges. So here we go. So I'm going to pour a little bit more alcohol so that we can help start moving it around, and see how I'm moving it back and forth so I can get those little fine lines that give you the wisping effect. There we go. I had to get it
off the board there. Don't let, this discourage you if you're having trouble. YUPO is not an easy paper to work in. It's just alcohol ink isn't easy because you're just moving fluid around to make something pretty, and that takes time. Learning how the alcohol moves and learning how to guide it and to get what you want takes practice. So don't let it discourage you if you don't get it on the first try, second try, even 10th try. It just takes time and practice and patience and an open mindset. So I've just poured a lot of alcohol because I want to thin this down a bit and then bring in that nice orange color through. I think that's the watermelon. And I've got the lettuce there. That's working through. It's just going to take some time. There we go. Just circling the blow dryer around it. So I'm trying to fade that pink boysenberry color into the orange or that watermelon color. And I'm also watching the lettuce because the lettuce color, if you mix it too much into the orange and the purple, it'll start looking brown. So I'm just very aware of that as I'm doing it. See how beautiful it pushes the pigment away and leaves these really beautiful spots. It's almost meditative when you're doing it. And I encourage anyone who hasn't done this to try it. So I'm adding more alcohol to make sure I can thin it out. And now we're adding some piñata brass. So I'm doing it while it's wet, only because it allows me to move it a little easier. So now I've got 3 colors that I'm moving around at the same time, watching it, making sure that I keep it on the paper, most of it on the paper. And you see, I'm just circling around it, adding alcohol to areas that I want to thin down, and just playing with it. So when you start this practice piece, you just want to make sure you have something in mind before you start, because when you do, it helps you just start. And it just helps you start. It doesn't have anything to do with how it's going to end up. It just helps you get started and put the ink down somewhere so you don't have to worry about it too much. And you notice we started in the bottom left corner, but now it's moved over to the center. And then it'll move away from the center and fill up the areas again. So it doesn't really matter where it starts. It matters where it ends up. So we're going to let it sit here for a little bit. And now I've brought in the Giotto lens cleaner. So the Giotto lens cleaner gives you a little bit more control and preciseness with the tip, and it's a manual little pump, and you can find it in my description, again in the affiliates link in the bottom of my description. I just sprayed a whole bunch of alcohol all over it, and that was by accident, but it's okay. Again, this is practice, so it adds character. We can always leave some of it and change the rest, so I'm not worried. So I'm going to use the Giotto to kind of push the ink in the direction that I want. Very detailed. It allows you to get very detailed in certain areas. Gets your hand tired after a while though, so I may just jump back to the blow dryer in a minute. But just showing how you can use this little lens cleaner manually and push the ink around and the alcohol around with it. Gives you some really cool effects as well. So I've almost completely removed all of the little spots that I had. Again, see, you can't let an accident like what just happened to me discourage you. Just keep going with it and keep trying to solve it. And you see how I just got a couple more spots, but I'm not letting it worry me. This is practice again. And you notice it's completely different than it was like a few minutes ago. So it allows you to change. The only issue that I have with the YUPO paper is the cost, but also the fact that it leaves a hint of staining, so you can't completely remove it. Like you could remove it a few times, but then it starts staining the paper to where it leaves a very, very faint coffee-like stain of the color, but it's still there. So for practice, it's okay, but typically for final pieces, I like to use canvas, and that's just me. There's a lot of people out there that use YUPO as a final, or a different type of paper called Nara. Some people use the back of photo paper, but that gets subjective because there's certain brands that work and certain doesn't, and that's a lot of testing. So YUPO is well known. I use plastic poster board in most cases to give me the practice that I need for a very cheap amount. But the only way I've been able to find that is through the States, and I find it at Michael's. It's fairly cheap. It's like $2.09, I think, for an 18 by 30 sheet that I cut down into smaller pieces to do my practice pieces before I jump to canvas. So here I'm just adding more alcohol and moving it around. It's kind of centered, and I'm trying to push it out away from the center without ruining some of the nice wispy lines that I have. But if it ruins it, if it affects those lines, then I'm gonna have to be open to that. Now it is raining outside, so I think I do have a bit of moisture in the room. You could see that where the edges are very they're just very uneven. They're like plateaued. They're not all smooth, and that's because of the moisture in the humidity. The humidity in the room. So now I'm going to try to put the extension on the Revlon blow dryer that gives the air a little flatter look. It also directs the air a little better. Let's try this and see if this helps. It's barely pushing air around, which is kind of frustrating because you want this thing to blow the air as fast as possible, and it's on low, which is okay. But now we're going to start looking at where to add the lettuce color, because the lettuce color, it's really, really green, and you don't want it to overwhelm the piece. So I'm just basically putting it in areas counterbalancing where it currently exists in the top left corner, and we're just kind of blending it in, and we're getting some really beautiful colors here. I'm also trying to be very cautious and not turn everything brown, because that's what tends to happen when you start mixing the lettuce green with the watermelon color or the boysenberry. So I'm going to add a little bit more gold here. And so I'm bringing the gold in. I'm trying to have it clump up together. You see how it, like, if you look really closely, you can see how there's this like line of gold when I try to gather it all together. You see that? It tends to try to get, it clumps up together, and that's what you kind of want. So you have these little fine lines of gold. See how I'm kind of moving it, helping it dry, but I'm also trying to keep them together so that there's these little fine lines. Let's see. So I'm pushing the gold so it balances it out in other areas. But you see how, like, you see those little clumps of gold? So watch, when it dries, I try to push them next to each other so you get very, very fine lines. Adding a little bit more alcohol so I can move some more of the gold around. Help it kind of blend with the rest of the colors. The camera's not really picking it up, but there's actually very, very fine lines of gold in that white area on the top. So don't be afraid to use a brush. Because it's a metallic pigment, it's going to tend to sit, it's heavier than the pigment, so it sits on the paper. So you don't be afraid to move it with your brush to lift it back up off the paper. So we're making those little fine lines, still moving the gold around, and it's helping, just helping me see what is coming out of it from a compositional perspective. I still do see a lot of gold in the center, and I want to try to spread that out a little. So what I will do is I'll tend to use a brush and some alcohol, and I'll lift it up, or I'll just use more gold. But right now we're going to add a little bit more pigment. I'm going to add some of that watermelon color. And some more alcohol. And this time I've put the pigment down first before I put the alcohol. Usually I put the alcohol down and then I put the pigment. This time I put the pigment down first and use the alcohol next to it and push the alcohol into it. So it gives me a little bit more lines, sharper lines of where the pigment was. Just different ways of applying it give you different effects. So typically what I like to do to prevent staining, I'll pour the alcohol first, then put ink pigment drops inside of the alcohol, move it around before it settles and dries. Now, once you have a lot of pigment like this, you can put the pigment down first and then put alcohol above, below, left of it, or to the right of it, and then blend the alcohol into it. So we're coming in with a little bit more gold, and we're adding some in the top left to help complement that the lettuce color that's there. And let's add some more alcohol here to help move it. Now the chemical that's with the piñata brass isn't actually alcohol. They use a mix of alcohol and ethanol, and I think they call it blending solution. You can probably use the blending solution from Tim Holtz to help move it a little easier, but I tend to use just alcohol to help it move. Some people use blending solution because they want it to move all together in one clump of ink. Adding more alcohol, but I'm trying to be very cautious of the green, that lettuce that I have up there. It's a very fine little pretty detail that I'm trying to keep, but again, if it doesn't stay because I make a mistake, it's okay. I'm adding a little bit more of that lettuce here to complement the gold, and it's really cool because I've got the little fine detail of the green up the top left, and then it's kind of coming into this larger area of green. Now I'm gonna probably tone it down a little bit, or increase it. We'll see, depending on what I like and what I dislike as I'm moving this around. So a little bit more detail here, spreading it out a bit, playing with the gold that's there. Okay. Let's add a little bit more alcohol. You can't be afraid to mess it up. I can't reiterate that as enough, honestly, because you can't go in there afraid. This is just practice. Sometimes we're afraid because we're worried that we're going to waste money. Sometimes we're afraid because it's the last sheet of YUPO paper that we have, or the last amount of alcohol, or the last amount of this and that puts pressure on you to try to come up with something cool. So here we're going to try to add a little bit more lettuce to balance it out against the other side. And so again, so please, like, keep an open mind. Try not to worry about messing it up. That's not the point. I mean, there's a lot of other pressures outside that may put pressure on you, that make you feel like this is the only piece of paper that I've got to make good. Don't let that stuff bother you. Just let it go, and you'll have a beautiful piece. With a lot of practice. Sometimes, if this is your first one, you're gonna mess up, and that's okay. Just it's practice. So keep that mindset as well. I can't reiterate that enough, because I go through it all the time, and I just want to make sure that people know that I go through a lot of stumbles and faults. If you watch my other videos, you'll see on the larger pieces, on the canvas pieces, and even smaller demos, I have trouble sometimes, and that's normal. It's okay. So now we're using the Giotto because I don't want this to fly over into the purple color that I have, so I'm slowly moving it around. I wanted to control it with a Giotto, and I'm using both the blow dryer and the Giotto to kind of make sure that I'm keeping in this area and not having it spread too far. It's kind of, the Giotto helps me with just detail, quickly moving certain areas back and forth, so it helps. I'm just adding a little bit more alcohol here. Let's see. So I'm starting to see some interesting colors come out of the lettuce. I'm starting to see some blue, a little bit of blue come out of it. Blue and yellow do make green, so that's what you'll expect to see sometimes. The pigment breaks down so much with the alcohol that you start seeing the colors that make up that color. And sometimes it'll surprise you, especially with the black. The black color, you'll see some interesting colors emerge. Sometimes a rust color, sometimes blue, sometimes pink, depending on the pigment, the base, the substrate. It all matters. So now that lettuce color has turned almost like a rust brown, which is okay because it's a connection to the red and the purple. So, and it's not a lot, so it's okay. Continuing to add a couple drops of alcohol. See if I can spread this out a little bit and give it a little different detail. I kind of didn't like the way that it sat there in the corner, so I want it to be a little bit more gradual and for it to be for there to be more movement there. So I'm gonna add a little bit more lettuce here to bring back some of that green, so it matches sort of the other side. And I want it to feed off of the edge, so there we go. Come in now with the Giotto, the lens cleaner, to give myself a little bit more detail. And more alcohol. So I've just set it to high heat. And you see when you put it on high heat, it dries really quickly. And that's good for, an area like this where I'm trying to just keep it controlled, but I want it to give me the effects that I want really quickly, because I don't want it to spread too far and I want it to dry quickly so that it gives me the high pigment areas that I'm looking for. See how I'm moving it to the kind of the center corner area, because I don't want it to be spreading too far, and I want it to dry as fast as possible so that I can get the effect that I'm looking for. So now let's work the top right corner. We haven't played with that at all. I've just added some alcohol. Let's move it around, see what we can come up with. Keep it away from the green area because I do like that green area. And kind of want to spread some of this color out. There we go. So this is on hot, so that's why it's drying really quickly. So I'm gonna add a little bit more alcohol there and keep it moving here. Trying to push some of that pigment in, because I do notice that it is the staining that I was mentioning. You can see it on the outside right. It's just about balancing it and what you think is balance, because every person's view and vision is going to be different on what they like and what they think is balance for this particular piece. Some people may think, oh, you should have stopped a long time ago, but it's okay. This is a demo, so we're just practicing here. I just want to show the different outcomes of what it was and what it can be, and let me know where you think I should have stopped. Put the time code in the comment. So I'm kind of curious of what people like and what people think. It just helps me understand better. So there we go. There's the piece. I'm going to try to see if I can get it to focus. Here we go. So here's the piece. It's just a good test. You can kind of see the details of the gold in the green, which I'm really liking. That gold and green is really nice. I'm going to try to experiment that. So if you haven't done so, please subscribe. It'll notify you when I get new videos, and check out my other videos because I've got a lot of tutorials on painting on canvas, painting on linen, how to do it, and larger scales. So thanks again, Ascari Art.